Greetings to everybody. I'd like to speak today about what Moshe said, the birth of a son. I'll explain that title in just a moment. I'll begin by asking a question. The sages, the rabbis, when they speak of legalities, of laws that apply to the non-Jewish population of the world, and in general when they refer to the non-Jewish population of the world, they refer to that population as the sons of Noach, or what is known in today's parlance, Noachites. And this is in opposition to using terms that they could have very well used, such as speaking about the sons of Adam, or speaking about the sons of Enosh, or some other characters from the Tanakh, from the Bible. And they could have referred to this population using those terms. And so the question is, why the sons of Noach? What is it about this character in the Bible, in the Tanakh, in the Torah, that the sages referred to him in this manner and chose him to be the focus of this set of laws and of referring to the world population via him, through him? In truth, when we look into the text of the Torah, we see that from the text itself we have hints that this particular character was a person of note. This particular character was somebody special. He wasn't just a regular run-of-the-mill biblical character, but there was something different about him. And you can see this not only in the length of text and the number of chapters devoted to speaking of his life, to describing his story, but from the very first verse referring to him, we can already see that there was something special, something different about this individual. We look in the biblical text, in Bereshit, in Genesis chapter 5, verse 28, which describes his birth. And it states, Vayechi Lemech. Lemech lived for 182 years, and he had a son. Vayoled ben, it says in the Hebrew. He had a son. Now, people that have been reading this chapter all the way through from the beginning, and not just this particular verse, will notice right away that there's something different about this verse. Because when you go through the chapter, you see that as each generation is described, it says, and so gave birth to so-and-so. Names are provided. And so the text will say things such as, Canaan gave birth to Mahalalel. Mahalalel gave birth to Jared, to Yared, and so on and so forth. One name giving birth to another named character. Yet here, there is, in a sense, a dramatic introduction. It doesn't say, and Lemech gave birth to Noach, but it says Lemech gave birth to a son. And then it goes on to describe what name this son was given and why this son was given this particular name. But even before we get to why he was named what he was named and what his name actually is, this dramatic introduction, Vayoled ben, and he gave birth to us, he fathered a son, he gave birth to a son, already calls our attentions and waves flags. This idea that this verse is different was noted in exactly this way by a scholar of the 15th and the 16th century, Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, who points out this anomaly in the text. Now, although Rabbi Mizrahi writes out this anomaly and specifies it, it's my opinion that ancient voices already felt that there was something different about this verse, that there was something special, some interesting message that this verse was trying to impart to the reader of the biblical text. Some of the ancients that took notice of this verse is the anonymous writer of the Book of Enoch, Hanoch. We don't know who wrote this apocryphal work, the Book of Enoch or the Book of Hanoch. But when we read chapter 106 of this book, we see that the author of this volume, written at some point during the Second Temple era, probably in the mid-Second Temple era, the author of this work already took note that there was something different about Noach. And again, not just because of the number of chapters devoted to his life. I'll read to you just a little bit of what the text says in the first book of Enoch, chapter 106. And after some days, my son, Methuselah, Enoch, Hanoch is speaking, took a wife for his son, Lamech, and she became pregnant by him and bore a son. This phrase, and bore a son, seems to be a very strong reflection of the verse in Genesis, in Bereshit, Vayoled ben. And now the author of the Book of Enoch expands on this and describes this child that was born, even before mentioning what his name was. And his body was white as snow, and red as the blooming of a rose, and the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes beautiful. Admittedly a strange description for a child. And when he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very bright. And thereupon he arose in the hands of the midwife, opened his mouth, and conversed with the Lord of righteousness. You can tell from this writing, from this author, that the author of this volume sensed that there was something special, as we noticed before, something unique, something different about this child. And he wished to give expression to that and expanded on the biblical story in this almost fantastical way. But the message that we, the readers, get is, aside from the details of the description, we sense that the ancients saw something very, very unique in this particular character of Noach. The author of the Book of Enoch is not the only one who noticed something different amongst the ancients that in this child, in this son called Noach. But the rabbis, the sages of the Talmud and the Midrash, also took notice of this. And they commented, although in a much briefer manner. The comment of the sages appears in the work of the medieval scholar, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, Rashi, who cites a Midrash that predates him by about 400 to 600 years, the Midrash Tanchuma. And the Midrash speaks as follows of Noach: Shemimenu nivna ha'olam. A 3-word comment in the Hebrew. From him, from this child, the entire world will be built up. What makes this child special? What did the rabbis see? What did the ancient writers see about this child that makes him special? What is it about this individual that the biblical text will change its style of presenting the generations between Adam, and Noach in order to highlight the birth of this particular baby boy? What is it about him? Was it just an accident of birth? Was it just that he happened to be in the right place at the right time? Or was there something special about this child himself something that he was born with, something that he will end up doing? These are the questions that come to mind as we read the words of the rabbis in the Midrash. Indeed, there are a number of ways of understanding what the rabbis of the Midrash say. The first approach to understanding the comment that the rabbis of the Midrash offer is from a scholar of the 13th century, Rabbi Chizkiah ben Manoach, in his commentary known as the Chizkuni. He writes very simply that what makes Noach special is the fact that he and his family end up being the sole survivors of the cataclysmic flood, which occurs in the 600th year of his life. And therefore the world becomes replenished. The human population is born anew through this individual, through this son, through Noach. And therefore the rabbis comment and say, from him the world will be built up. And it is because of this event, because of this future occurrence, that already now the verse highlights and says, and Vayoled ben, and a son was born, to speak about Noach, who will end up saving humanity and reestablishing the human line after the flood. Rabbi Chizkiah is again not the first to make note of this comment. This idea of understanding the specialness, the uniqueness of Noach, traces back once again to the Book of Enoch that we spoke about and cited before. In that same chapter, chapter 106 of the first book of Enoch, it states, "Yea, there shall come a great destruction over the whole earth, and there shall be a deluge, a flood, and a great destruction for 1 year. And this son who has been born unto you shall be left on the earth, and his 3 children shall be saved with him. When all mankind that are on the earth shall die, and he and his sons shall be saved." So therefore, the concept, the idea expressed by Rabbi Chizkiah in the 13th century finds expression several centuries, more than that, before in the Book of Enoch, to say that what makes Noach special, what makes him so important, is that he is the new Adam. He is the one from whom all children, all humanity will descend in future times. And that's the comment of the sages. From him, the world will be built up. But there's another understanding of what the sages have to say. This comes from another scholar, Rabbi Binyamin Menachem Danon, in his commentary to the book of Rashi, who we cited earlier. He says an interesting idea. He says, no, it has nothing to do with what will happen in a future occasion, in a future moment in Noach's life, but it has everything to do with what happened at the time Noach was born. Because at the time that Noach was born, argues Rabbi Danon, the curse that was placed on the earth back in the days of Adam, the curse that was placed on the earth, that thorns and thistles will come forth, and the human being will have to work very hard to produce his bread, that curse was lifted when Noach was born. And once the curse was lifted, it was much easier for people to then go about and engage in their agricultural activities, in their life-nourishing activities of tilling the soil and of growing the produce and of then preparing that produce for food. And it's this idea, it's in this manner that the sages commented and said, from him the world was built up. From Noach the world was built up. Because up until that time, growth for the world was hindered. The people had a very difficult time to produce food for everybody. It's not clear just what the population of the earth was at that time. But Rabbi Danon gives us the idea that after Noach was born and the curse was lifted, the population of the earth experienced growth because of the lifting of that curse. Rabbi Danon is not the only one to hold of this idea. A later scholar from the 18th century, from the 19th century, Rabbi Beno Jacob argues the same point. And he says, only as long as Adam lived was the earth under a curse. And as according to the chronology of this chapter, Noach was the first man born after the death of Adam, his birth becomes the presage of a new age to mankind. So this is a second way of understanding just what the rabbis might have meant when they said, from him, from Noach, the world was built up. But there's a third approach as well. In this third approach, an approach of one of the ancient midrashim, it states as follows. When Noach was born, nothing happened. Not like Rabbi Danon and like Rabbi Jacob argue. Indeed, the curse was lifted in the days of Noach, but it wasn't at the time of Noach's birth. It was much later, because this midrash ascribes to Noach the invention of various farm implements. And it was these farm implements which then allowed for the tilling of the soil to occur much easier. And so the Midrash argues that the lifting of the curse did not just occur in a magical, mysterious, a metaphysical way, but occurred in a very physical way by Noach inventing various implements to allow the people to till the soil and to engage in their work. According to this approach, says the Midrash very clearly, Noach himself did not receive his name at birth, but rather only after he invented those implements. In this sense, Noach had a very strong hand in bringing about the change that the rabbis ascribed to him. It wasn't just the fact that he was born at a certain time. It wasn't just the fact that he happened to survive the flood. These were not accidents of his life that brought about the dramatic changes that the rabbis noted by saying, from him the world was built up. But it had everything to do with Noach taking the initiative, with Noach going out and creating ways to better the world. I find that this third approach has a very Jewish perspective to it, if I may say. The idea that the human being takes an active role in changing the world, the idea that the human being partners with Hashem, with God, in bettering this world, is brought out very strongly by this midrash. Yes, the land was cursed. Yes, human beings were affected for a very long time by this curse. But the curse was lifted, not just by some accident, not just because some curse expired, but because somebody went out and took the initiative to change the world around him. And it is this which merited Noach to receive the honor that the rabbis bestowed upon him, to say, from him the world was built up. The world was built up because this individual took the initiative to change the world. There is a fourth approach which parallels this third approach, and that is by a contemporary, Rabbi Shlomo Strasberg. Rabbi Shlomo Strasberg argues that the changes that Noach brought about might not have necessarily been in the physical realm. If we look through the text, we see very shortly afterwards, in the 6th chapter of Bereshit, that Noach is referred to as a righteous man. We know how the text speaks about the violence and the robbery and the crime that was prevalent in that generation, and yet the verse highlights the righteousness of Noach. Says Rabbi Strasberg that the structure built up by Noach might not have been in the physical realms, but in the spiritual realms. That he brought about some kind of revolution, some kind of upheaval in a spiritual sense to bring change to the world. And it is in a spiritual sense that the world was built up from him. In a very strong manner of understanding, Rabbi Strasberg's comments ties us together very strongly with the idea that the laws for the general population of the world envisioned by the rabbis are referred to as the sons of Noah, as the laws of the children of Noah. Because this spiritual legal structure for the population of the world is ascribed to Noah, who brought about a spiritual revolution in his own generation, and from him is built up the world. We have one final question to deal with. And this final question is all that I've said up until now is very nice. However, what's the connection to the phrase Vayoled ben, and a son was born? How do all these ideas connect to this very simple two-word phrase in the Hebrew Bible, in the Hebrew scripture? Explains Rabbi Yehuda Liva, known as the Maharal of Prague, in his commentary, Gur Aryeh. And he comments and says it's very easy, because Vayoled ben, and a son was born, what does the word ben, son, really mean? He says the word ben is related to the word binyan, which means structure, construction, a building up. Because a son, a child, is the continuation of his parents, is the continuation of his father. And the son builds up the family structure that the parents began, and continues the family structure begun by his parents. And that is why in Hebrew a child is called son, is called ben, because it comes from the word binyan, to be built up, to build a structure. And so when the rabbis comment about Noach, shemimenu, because from him, nivna ha'olam, the world was built up, their comment is direct exegesis. It's a direct commentary on the word ben, son, in our verse in Bereshit, in Genesis. And so the rabbis are commenting that Noach, from him, the world was built up. And that is why his birth is introduced to us with the words of Vayoled ben, a son was born, this dramatic introduction, in order to give us this insight into who this special character was and what he means for humanity.